Hey everyone, before you dive into this story, do me a solid. Hit that subscribe button and the notification bell. Why? Because what you're about to read isn't some dry history book excerpt. This is a deep dive into one of the biggest military mysteries of the late 20th century. We're going to break down myths, analyze the economics, and look at the real human beings inside these metal boxes. You'll find some shocking conclusions at the end and another call to action. Stay until the end, and let me know in the comments what you think. Your opinion is what matters. Let's get started. A storm in a teacup. Why Soviet T-72 tanks lost to the Abrams in Iraq in '91. The truth you haven't heard. You know, history is full of events that seem tailor-made for arguments. They get surrounded by myths and legends. They become symbols. The short but fierce Gulf War in 1991 became one such symbol. On TV, it's often shown as a clean, easy victory. High-tech America versus a backward Iraq. But is it really that simple? Let's pull back the curtain of propaganda and look at what actually happened. If you strip away all the emotion and politics, Operation Desert Storm was a virtuoso military operation to defeat a very powerful regional power. Yes, Iraq had just come out of an 8-year meat grinder of a war with Iran, but don't be fooled. That war didn't weaken it. On the contrary, it hardened Iraq. It created a huge, experienced, and confident army. An army that knew the price of blood and victory. Here's a number to understand the scale. During the invasion of Kuwait, Saddam Hussein assembled about 100,000 soldiers and officers, supported by 700 tanks. This was no partisan detachment. This was an iron fist, and the Iraqi tank crews proved to be far from cowardly. Take one episode that tells you a lot about their character and the problems that plagued them. August 2nd, 1990. An armored group from the elite Hammurabi division is moving into Kuwait. They are confident. They expect a walk in the park. And suddenly, a brutal ambush. They are met with fire from Kuwaiti M84 tanks. And what beast is that? It's a licensed copy of the Soviet T-72, produced in Yugoslavia. It was almost a duel of the same tank, but with different crews. And here the first huge problem of the Iraqi army is exposed: reconnaissance. Or rather, it's almost complete absence. Why did this happen? Because the Iraqi command bet on speed, on pressure. They thought the enemy wouldn't have time to recover. Aerial reconnaissance, drones, which were just a dream back then, satellite data. None of this interested them much. They were playing checkers, while the Americans were already mastering chess. This speed, of course, worked. Kuwait fell quickly. But it was a Pyrrhic victory, because they had to pay for it with blood and, more importantly, with a lack of understanding of who was waiting for them behind the next dune. Economic brief. What was Iraq fighting for? Let's pause for a second and look at the economics. What was Iraq fighting for? Not for democracy, that's for sure. The war for Kuwait was a war for oil and debts. After 8 years of war with Iran, Saddam Hussein had accumulated colossal debts to his neighbors, including Kuwait and Saudi Arabia. Oil prices were low, and the debts were astronomical. Seizing Kuwait solved two problems at once. Iraq gained control of giant oil fields and effectively wrote off its debts by annexing the creditor country. But Saddam miscalculated. He thought the world would accept the redrawing of borders as it had before. He didn't account for the fact that the Cold War was over. The USSR, his main ally and patron, was weak and could not veto a UN Security Council resolution. The world had become unipolar, and in this new world, Iraq became a perfect target for demonstrating the power of the sole remaining superpower, the USA. America and its allies acted lightning fast. They managed to assemble about 700,000 people under their command, a real international coalition. And this wasn't just a crowd of people. It was a high-precision mechanism. They threw up to 1,500 tanks into the main thrust. An impressive number, for sure. But as it turned out, it wasn't about the quantity. And this is where we approach the main myth the very storm in a teacup we're all here for. Clash of the Titans, Steel versus Technology. February 26th. The area of Al Busaya. Units of the legendary U.S. 7th Corps, the pride of the American Army, are moving forward. And suddenly, an unexpected counterstrike. Their lead column runs into an ambush of Iraqi T-72s. A battle ensues, and something incredible happens. The Americans retreat, having taken losses. According to various sources, they lose at least one, if not several, of their supermodern Abrams. Imagine this picture: a Soviet tank, born in the design bureaus of Nizhny Tagil, punches straight through the frontal armor of the best tank the West had to offer. It was a moment of truth. It was a small triumph for the Iraqi tankers, and if you will, for the entire Soviet military-industrial complex. But, friends, this small success became the Iraqis' only piece of luck. A golden spark that immediately faded in the pitch darkness of the enemy's total superiority. Why? Because one victory in a battle is tactics. But war is won by strategy. And the American strategy was simple, like a sledgehammer. Hit not the muscle, but the brain. They didn't rush into frontal assaults. They began to advance on a broad front, slowly, methodically, at a speed of 3 to 15 kilometers per hour. That's not an attack speed. That's a hunting speed. Imagine a pack of wolves slowly surrounding a herd. And the main trump card in this hunt was optics. While Iraqi tank crews were peering into the sandy haze, the Abrams crews saw them as clear as day. Their thermal sights allowed for aimed fire from distances of 2.5 kilometers and more. For the Iraqis, it was like magic. Their tanks started exploding one after another, and they couldn't even see where the fire was coming from. All they saw were distant flashes on the horizon, like lightning in the desert. And what about the night? The night, which has always been the friend of the weaker side, became a nightmare for the Iraqis. Their T-72s didn't have night sights. They were blind. The only thing they could do was shoot at the muzzle flashes. It was like trying to hit a sniper with a slingshot when he's shooting from behind two hills. The breakdown. Why was the Abrams more effective? Let's break down the reasons for this defeat piece by piece. Ammunition. This is a separate and very painful topic. The Americans massively used armor-piercing, fin-stabilized discarding sabot, APFSDS, rounds with depleted uranium. It's a terrifying weapon. A heavy, dense uranium rod flying at a cosmic speed would burn through the armor of Soviet tanks like a can opener. And what did the Iraqis have? Outdated armor-piercing shells, mainly the 3VBM-7. Against the Abrams armor, they were like peas against a wall. The difference in penetration power was colossal. Crew training. The Iraqi tankers were brave soldiers, but they were trained according to old Soviet manuals that emphasized mass breakthroughs in close-quarters combat. Their opponents had undergone months of training on the most modern simulators. Every member of an Abrams crew knew his job inside and out. It was a fight between a professional and an amateur, albeit a very brave one. The overall combat system. A tank isn't just a gun on tracks. It's part of a system: reconnaissance, communications, air support, electronic warfare. The American Army was a single organism. The Iraqi Army was a collection of parts that fit together poorly. While the tanks tried to counterattack, their communications were jammed and bombs and rockets rained down on them from the sky. And here begins the heaviest and most uncomfortable part of this story. After a few such battles, closer to morning, the elite Iraqi tank divisions, the pride of the army, simply ran. They abandoned serviceable equipment. They threw away their weapons. They left behind burning oil rigs. Many Western, and even our own, analysts like to blame this on some mythical trait of Middle Eastern peoples. You know, they're fierce in the first attack, but if it fails, their morale breaks and panic begins. You know what I'll tell you? That's a profound misconception and an oversimplification. It's not about traits. Put yourself in the shoes of a young Iraqi guy conscripted into the army. You're sitting in the tight, stuffy turret of a tank that smells of diesel and fear. You can't see the enemy. You can't shoot back. Your comrades around you are turning into fireballs one by one. The commander is screaming over the radio, which is full of static. You understand nothing. This isn't war. This is a slaughter. It's a feeling of utter helplessness in the face of an invisible, all-seeing force. Anyone would break. Any army in the world at that time, finding itself in similar conditions, would have broken. It's not about the strength of spirit, but about the technological gap that turned a man into a target. The conclusions that await us. So, was the T-72 a bad tank? Absolutely not. It was and remains a magnificent fighting vehicle, one of the best in its class. But a tank is just a tool. The outcome of a battle is determined not by the tool, but by the system it's part of. In 1991, the American war machine, as a system, was several generations ahead of what Iraq could offer. This war was a shock to the whole world, and especially to the Russian military. It forced a rethink of all doctrines, all approaches to warfare. It showed that the future belonged to high-precision weapons, information dominance, and total reconnaissance superiority. So yes, Desert Storm wasn't just a defeat. It was a lesson that cost thousands of lives, showing where military science was headed. And it's a lesson that, unfortunately, not everyone heard. Well, that brings our story to a close. But this is just the start of your own thoughts. I've given you my version of events, based on analyzing dozens of sources. But what do you think? Who was really to blame for the defeat of the Iraqi army? The technology, the strategy, or something else entirely? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Let's get a real discussion going. And of course, if you want to see more of this kind of deep dive into military mysteries, hit that subscribe button, smash the like button, and click the bell. We've got plenty more topics coming that will make you see history in a whole new light. Thanks for sticking with me until the very end.